And now we're going to swing over to Indiana out of the States, where we're joined by Mr. E. Michael Jones, editor of Culture Wars online magazine. Hello, Mr. Jones, and thanks for joining us here on Press TV's Top 5 once again, sir. Now, nothing has persuaded Riyadh into stopping its bombing of civilian areas in Yemen. Do you think this latest retaliatory attack will influence the Saudis and their allies to start thinking about halting their year-and-a-half-long aerial bombardment?
Well, they certainly have something serious to think about now, because there are two significant factors here. One, the position that al-Houthi is occupying, and two, the weapons they have. You put these two things together, and now they have basically the capacity to shut down the Bab al-Mandeb Straits. Well, that's one of the major shipping lanes for oil and all sorts of other things heading from Asia, certainly from Saudi Arabia into Europe. So the other issue here is, of course, this disparity that no one can figure out between the missile and the ship, or the missile and the tank, or the missile and the aircraft carrier. At this point, it looks as if the edge in warfare is now to the people who have missiles. And so this is certainly serious. This is a serious development, because this warship is not as vulnerable as tankers, and it was just blown out of the water by the missile that the al-Houthis have, and now they control the straits. So how Saudi is going to react is anybody's guess at this point. It's hard to tell, because now the war in Syria is coming to a climax. The Saudis are overextended and fighting a war on two fronts, and I don't know how they're going to react at this point.
Well, I mean, many people are shocked that Saudi Arabia has carried out these attacks on Yemeni cities for this long now with their so-called coalition. Why do you think Riyadh has been so brutal and uncompromising with its approach toward its southern neighbor?
Well, I think they listen to their American advisors too much, and they have the sense that they have technological superiority because they buy American weapons. Well, as I said earlier, it's not clear anymore that there is this great technological edge that they have. They spend a lot of money, but whether they get a payback on it, it's not clear. So I think every time they buy a new weapon system, they're convinced that they can end the war simply by technological force majeure. And it's clear that that's not working. It hasn't worked so far. It's not going to work in the future. At a certain point, they're going to have to reassess their strategy.
And ultimately, they're really unrelenting in negotiations too. They don't want the Ansarullah, the Houthis, to have any say or voice in their own country's government. They're totally meddling in the Yemen's internal affairs, and they ultimately want to have the last say in who governs this country, which kind of points to there being no peace in sight in the near future.
Well, the peace may come when they realize that they're overextended and they're not winning. Maybe they'll back off. Now they've got a serious existential threat to their link with the West. If the al-Houthi can sink a warship in the Bab al-Mandeb Straits, they can certainly sink oil tankers. And if that's the case, they got a serious situation on their hands. So what are they going to do? Buy more weapons, try that strategy that failed. They don't know how to use the weapons. They have to hire people to use the weapons. They don't have troops on the ground. That's not working. So at a certain point, somebody's going to have to wake up and say, maybe we need a different type of strategy here.
Thank you, Mr. E. Michael Jones, for your valuable input, editor of Culture Wars online magazine, joining us out of Indiana in the States.